real-life show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and welcome to Into the Fringe number 56, where our guest tonight is Lon Strickler. Lon Strickler is a Fortean researcher, author, and publisher of the syndicated Phantoms and Monsters blog. He began the blog in 2005, which has steadily grown in popularity and is read daily by tens of thousands of paranormal enthusiasts, investigators, and truth seekers. His research and reports have been featured on hundreds of online media sources. Several of these published reports have been presented on various television segments, including the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, Sci-Fi's Paranormal Witness, Fact or Faked, Paranormal Files, and Destination America, Monsters and Mysteries in America. Lon has been interviewed on hundreds of radio and online broadcasts, including multiple guest appearances on Coast to Coast AM. He was also featured on Destination America's Monsters and Mysteries in America television show for the Sykesville Monster episode. Lon has written 9 books and is currently the host of the Phantoms and Monsters radio. He has been... Lon was born and raised in South Central Pennsylvania near the Gettysburg National Military Park and Battlefield. After living in the Baltimore, Maryland metro area for 40 years, he eventually moved back to his hometown in 2016. Welcome to Into the Fringe, Lon Strickler.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Want to just say hello to some folks in the chat real quick. Nancy Malcolm, Vincent Richardson is here. And Carol Latin Dress is here. James West is here. Hello. Greetings. Ari is here. And Dadius Munchausen is here. So we are ready to roll. And we will go ahead and do that. Lon, I wanted to ask you... if you can give us a general background on how you got involved researching the paranormal and sort of walk us through from when you started until today.
Well, that's a long story. Like you stated in the bio, I was born and raised near Gettysburg Battlefield. And I used to spend a lot of time there as a kid. I was a little history nerd when I was a kid, but I was... I just like to go out there in the summers, ride my bike out there and just spend time. Well, one day when I was 9, and I think this was 1967 or so, or 68, I was out in the area of the Valley of Death, which is, for those who know the battlefield, it's in between Little Round Top, Devil's Den, and the wheat field. And what I did, I was riding along the road, the access road, and all of a sudden, it's like a huge window opened up, our TV screen opened up in front of me. And I started to see the battle. Actually, I saw soldiers, heard cannon fire, gunfire, screams, smelled gunpowder. All my senses were heightened. And that lasted for about, I'd say 30 seconds and just suddenly quit. And, I, even though I was young, I'd always known there was something a little different about me. But that was kind of the event that made it clear to me that, I could sense things and see things. And as time went on, as I got older, I started looking into the paranormal, even though back then, that wasn't, people didn't, you weren't, people didn't really recognize paranormal investigations. You'd tell them you look into ghosts and stuff, and you get that weird look, But yeah, that's what I did. And after I graduated from high school, I moved down to Maryland. I lived outside of Baltimore, near the city, for almost 40 years. But I did a lot of investigations in Maryland and in Pennsylvania through that period of time. And it was mostly all infestations and clearings and such until I had a Bigfoot encounter back in '81 down in Sykesville, Maryland. And that kind of got me going with cryptids. And, I've kind of been an eclectic investigator since then. See, everything that's unexplained interests me for the most part, and that's what I'm looking into. And I've been doing that now. Well, I've been doing all this for almost 45 years, I'd say.
Wow, that's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And just saying hello to some folks in the chat again. And I had a very similar situation to you. As soon as I was able to read, my mom would take me to the library, and for some reason I just gravitated toward the paranormal section and read every book that they had, and then read every book on the paranormal in the adult section, and still reading today. So we need authors and investigators like you to keep this stuff going.
I agree.
Let's share the screen here and show folks the Meme Humanoids. Let's talk about that book, the Meme Humanoids, Modern Myths or Real Monsters. What are Meme Humanoids?
Well, a meme is basically an idea, behavior, maybe an image or something, a style that's spread throughout the internet, also through social media platforms and such. But I believe a lot of this started with some of the Slender Man stories, and then there were others that people were calling rakes and flesh gates and this and that, of these pale white, hairless humanoids, no facial features for the most part. Sometimes there were, but they were very gangly looking, and they just seemed to turn up. I mean, so the fact that I called it the Meme Humanoids, it really for twofold was that people were familiar with these images from the internet, and that when they saw something like this, they is automatically associated with these memes. But also, I have also taken the theory that it may possibly be thought form manifestation,
like tulpas.
Tulpas, exactly. And so it's. But then again, if that isn't the case, then where are these things coming from? Mm-hmm. I mean, are we dealing with the nexus of a new human-like species? I don't know. If we are, are they indigenous, or are they from some other dimension, some other reality?
Right.
We just don't know that. Yeah. So what I did, I wrote I kind of did a primer from some of the earlier pale humanoids and others, possibly that could be of alien origin or all. But I wrote a bit about that early. Then I actually started going into some of the cases that I've been investigating, and then some of the cases that have been coming to me since then. And, for the most part, I put all the information out there, then let the readers decide for themselves what's really going on.
Do you think that some of these gangly, pale-skinned, meme humanoids are related at all to the real Men in Black, not the movie variety, not the Air Force? You got a real nice car there. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it. Not that kind. I mean the real ones.
Well, the whole Men in Black phenomena, as far as I'm concerned, and I write about it in my book Alien Disclosure, I think they are actually non-terrestrial beings. I don't think they're associated with the government at all. I think they're kind of like the extraterrestrial cleanup crew, basically. When and how they have the ability to determine who sees a UFO or sees something that they really shouldn't see is a mystery to us. But I believe that they kind of go into a situation where there is a witness of something, UFO or an alien being, and try to talk the witness into not reporting it. I've had reports from people who have told me that literally minutes up to maybe 20 minutes, even before they even get a chance to report something, these guys in black show up. And there's always something different about them. They're like a robotic type of being. They have olive colored skin. They wear black for the most part. They usually have something covering their eyes. Sometimes they wear fedoras. Sometimes they wear some type of more tech-like black suits. But they're always there to inform the witness that, it's better if you not just, disclose this. So as far as them being related to the memes or to the humanoids, the pale humanoids, I don't know. I guess it's a possibility, but I've never really thought about that.
The reason I bring it up is that the air quotes real Men in Black, as reported by John Keel and others, look like they have makeup on. They're very pale skinned, and I was just curious if you thought that there might be a connection between that and the meme humanoids.
No, I don't know. I don't think it is.
Let's go ahead and talk about your book about the Chicago Mothman. It seems like the sightings of strange winged beings is as old as history itself, and it's still happening today. Can you tell us about the Chicago Mothman investigation and your book, Mothman Dynasty, Chicago's Winged Humanoids?
Yeah, we started looking into this when the first 3 reports came from MUFON back in 2011. There were 3 sightings in South Chicago. Manuel Navarrete from UFO Clearinghouse and I were looking into this, and we reported it. Of course, it was on MUFON CMS, and it got a little bit of press, but not a whole lot. So these were type winged beings, unknown winged beings. There was really no specific description other than one person said it looked like a huge sugar glider in the air. Now, there was a photograph that I believe was actually a butterfly or a moth or something, not actually a winged humanoid.
Important to stay skeptical when we're
and
dealing with the paranormal.
As far as but after those 3 incidents, it kind of died off. So I didn't really hear a whole lot about these winged beings showing up in Chicago. There's always been, Chicago's always a very heavily paranormal area. I mean, UFOs and hauntings and such. There's always something going on there.
O'Hare.
Well, O'Hare as well with the UFO they had back in, was it 2008 or 2000? I forget what date year it was.
That is kind of an older case, isn't it?
But we, you know, we, I remembered all this stuff, but in 2017, that's when it started to really pick up. There was a report that came out of North Chicago around Oz Park. Now, these original reports came from MUFON, but Manuel was fortunate enough to be able to track this woman down who had the encounter. And basically, her assessment was that it was a winged humanoid with insectoid type wings that kind of were higher than the body itself, with very bright red eyes. And she had come upon it in Oz Park as she was walking her dog. And this thing saw her, and it jettisoned itself into the air without the wings, and
Really?
let out a scream and then took off.
Wow.
And this is, as the investigation has gone on since 2017, this is something that is very similar to all the sightings. This thing seems to have the ability to move without using the wings for propulsion. I had an encounter in 1988 here in Pennsylvania, where I saw something very similar that did the same thing. So, I was, I kind of thought that maybe this might be related. I don't know. But anyway, as we've gone on, these reports have kind of stretched out into the suburbs and down into northern Indiana and the other parts of Illinois and up into southern Wisconsin. And as of this date, we've got about 140 sightings that we believe are valid sightings. But, starting in October 2019, the majority of the sightings have been coming around O'Hare International.
How much, for people that aren't maybe familiar with the old Mothman,
Mm-hmm.
The John Keel investigation, what are the contrasts and when you compare and contrast those Mothman sightings with the ones in Chicago, what do you get out of that?
Well, there is a difference. I mean, the Point Pleasant Mothman, which was active, but it still has been active off and on since then. I think this being still is around. But anyway, that was back in 1966 and 67 in the small river town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where people had been reporting seeing a winged being that reminded them of the wings, reminded them that of a moth, but this was also a biped, had legs and arms, and had very bright red eyes. And the area where it was mostly seen at was around the West Virginia Ordnance Works, for what people called the Tnt Plant. And occasionally these people would come there, young adults, they would park there and hang out there at that area. It was a closed facility. And this being would start showing up and chase them out of there. Now, I have some personal thoughts about the actual Mothman itself. I have investigated the Point Pleasant area and the Ordnance Works for a long time now. I've been involved with several investigations down there. And I believe that the nexus of these sightings is because of a very, very strong indigenous spirit that resides there. And because of that, and because the intrusion of these young adults and folks around that area, I think the Mothman was actually a summoned being as a protector or a guardian of some type. And because of that, I think it was used to keep people away from it. Now, the whole Mothman legend, the whole Mothman phenomena was going on at a steady clip. John Keel, like you mentioned, got involved with it. He came down from New York and started doing investigations. There were other things going on as well. There were UFO sightings, other increased hauntings and such. But it kind of culminated into the Silver Bridge collapse, which happened in December of 1967, right before Christmas.
And that's the one that's covered in the Mothman Prophecies by John Keel, right?
Yeah, and 46 people passed away by the bridge collapse. And, this being a small town, and you get a tragedy of that magnitude, people are looking for answers. So, of course, someone said that they had seen the Mothman hovering above the bridge at some point, kind of after the fact.
Before the collapse?
Yeah, kind of after the fact. And, this whole legend of it being a harbinger of doom kind of developed up because of that. I don't buy into that. I've heard that excuse for several other tragedies, like the Mississippi River Bridge collapse in Minneapolis, and Fukushima. The only.
Do you think these things get mythologized?
Yeah, absolutely. The only incident that I can point to that there had been previous sightings of a winged humanoid winged being was the Blackbird of Chernobyl, and people
I've
did
never heard of that.
previous.
Please do tell.
People did report seeing this thing hover above the reactor days before the actual meltdown. So is that a harbinger? I don't know. I mean, but people did report it now. But it's just like, I just don't believe that the whole Mothman or winged humanoid phenomena are harbingers. And in fact, it's interesting, when we started working on this case in 2017, I was literally getting phone calls 24/7 from people in Chicago who were following this and were wondering if something was going to happen in Chicago. And of course, I'm trying to dispel a lot of this with folks and tell them, look, I have no idea. I don't really buy into the harbinger theory. And be honest with you, since that time, we haven't really had any evidence that these sightings have anything to do with any type of tragedy.
Do you think that the harbinger of doom aspect of the Point Pleasant Mothman was part of John Keel's showmanship, kind of raising the stakes with the creative license?
Well, he didn't help, he was a journalist, so that's what journalists do,
right?
And he kind of did embellish it a bit, but the fact that he kept on this thing, is a testament to his doggedness with it. The folks that watched the movie The Mothman Prophecies, they ought to really read the book, because
it's a horrible movie.
The film just does not do it any justice.
It's an awful movie that makes no sense and has nothing to do with anything.
I talked to John not long after the film was released, and he was a bit disappointed, but he didn't mind the notoriety, because that's just the way he was.
My understanding is that he was happy to have it optioned.
Yeah,
he was. Any writer is happy to have it optioned, but a guy like John Keel, who wrote so many books, I think probably embellished a little, or maybe a lot. He did. And when one of your books gets optioned and you're a writer, hey, that's cash, so you grab it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I've been there, so I know. I mean, with advertising and such, and the powers that be, they're going to want a little spice any story up a bit, especially a paranormal story. So I've been there.
Vincent Richardson in the chat says, Lon, tell him about the recent Indrid Cold call.
Yeah, that's something that happened. It was last year or the year before. It happened in Hartwick, New York. I have an associate who lives in Queens, and he got a phone call from a friend of his up in Hartwick, New York. And this lady told him that she had just seen a winged humanoid outside of her home. Wow. And not long after the incident, before she even had a chance to report it to anyone, she received a phone call that on the call ID said Indrid Cold. Now, that's a little strange. And
for those of us that don't know already, who is Indrid Cold, or who was Indrid Cold?
Well, Indrid Cold was an individual, supposed individual, who encountered a gentleman by the name of Woodrow Derenberger in West Virginia, in an area just north of Point Pleasant. And this Indrid Cold was supposedly an extraterrestrial who had hovered and landed in front of Woodrow Deringer and came out and conversed with him. And apparently, as time had gone on, they had kept in contact. Even their families kept in contact with each other as years went by. So the whole Indrid Cold thing and the association with the Mothman, they happen around the same time. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's a real connection there, but when I did get this report and I was told that this happened, I contacted a person who is part of my team. His name is Dr. Raymond. Oh God, I forget. I don't know why I just forgot Ray's last name. Yeah, but anyway, Raymond Keller. Raymond Keller. Dr. Raymond Keller. He's I believe one of the top ufologists around. He's written several
books.
Where's he from? He's from Morgantown, West Virginia. He's a retired professor at West Virginia University, history professor, but he's been into the UFO phenomenon all his life. And I called him and we talked about this, and he told me he thought the Indrid Cold thing may actually have been real. And because I asked him point blank, I said, "Do you think Indrid Cold's still around?" He said, "Absolutely, I do." So I just thought it was strange, but the whole, we really have never gotten any answers to this as to what happened. But it's just a little footnote there as far as this whole Indrid Cold phenomena, and especially since there was a case that fell to me, and one of my associates my associate actually went up there and investigated it. So he was with her a week, and nothing else happened while he was there. But the house itself had some haunting issues as well. So it was interesting. But like I said, another footnote.
Right. I understand that you had some personal encounters in 1981 and 1988. Can you tell us about those?
Well, in 1981, I had been living in Sykesville, Maryland for a couple years. And I used to do a lot of fly fishing. So I went to an area on the South Branch of Pataska River, about a mile downstream from Sykesville, Maryland. And an area where I used to go fly fishing for rock bass and smallmouth. And area I've been to a lot, and not really wide there. I guess the river itself was maybe about 30 foot across there. But anyway, I was standing in the river in my hip waders, and I noticed this dog across on the north side, kind of meandering within the weeds and stuff. And I didn't pay him any mind, So, but until I heard the dog make a yelping sound, like, something was around or something happened. I looked over and I saw this something stand up in the weeds, and it was dark, it was hairy, and I was just watching it. I could see kind of mid body up to to the head, and it was huge. And as I watched it, started moving to my left and walked out of the weeds and was standing on the riverbank. And I was about 40 foot away from it. And I got a full look at it. It was about 8 foot in height, very muscular, dark brown hair, kind of matted in a way. It was definitely a male. I could see the genitalia on it. Just a massive being, and it had like a conical head on it, but the face itself looked more human than it did ape. It had the large brow ridge, and it was standing there just looking at me, and it was making this ticking sound, which I later found out or believed that it was gnashing its teeth. Maybe some type of nervous tick or sound, something, as far as seeing something it wasn't familiar with, But anyway, we locked eyes for about 10 seconds or so. And of course, here I am standing in a river in hip waders, and I'm not going anywhere. And and after that, it just turned. It didn't show any emotion or expression or anything, and just turned and started walking briskly up into the woods. So, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. Sure, I had heard of Bigfoot. This was about the time that the Boggy Creek thing started hitting the movies and stuff. There was the Legend of Boggy Creek. So
so much Boggy Creek too.
Yeah, but anyway, so I got out of the river and I walked up to my car, got in the car, and went back into town. So I stopped at the first phone I could find, and I called the Sykesville police and told them what I saw. And they told me, well, go back there and we'll have a Maryland State, we'll have a police officer meet you there.
Like the first thing that you want to do is go back.
Yeah, I don't want to go back there, So, but I did. I went back, and it's only like a 3-minute drive back. So, but by the time I got there was a Maryland State police officer already there, and he had one of those.
Really?
He had one of those wooden barriers across the road. You're talking about 1981, so this wasn't tape or anything. They had the wooden barrier. So anyway, I pulled the car up, and he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Look, I made the report." He said, "Yeah, you got to turn around and go." I said, "Well, I was told to come back." Yeah, I know. You got to leave. So I did. I turned around and left. So I didn't talk to him or anybody else, and I went back home. So I was at home for about an hour. And I eventually went back again. And when I did, there were cars everywhere. And in fact, I had to park down the road about a quarter mile and walk up to the area because there were so many cars there. And when I did walk up to the barrier, there was a Howard County police officer standing there. And I asked him, I said, "What's going on?" He started kind of jokingly said, "Well, somebody said they saw a Bigfoot." Well, I didn't tell him I made the report. So, but anyway, there were people everywhere. I mean, there were people with dogs going in throughout both sides of the riverbank. There was a large white tent set up across where I had seen this thing. And there were all the jurisdictions were there as well as federal. And back then,
wow,
the feds used to drive those black Wagoneers. They didn't have SUVs, but there were two of those sitting there, and I heard a helicopter as well. Didn't see one, but I heard it. So they had everybody out there. So I don't know what had happened. The Baltimore, Washington area has a lot of government facilities everywhere. Places, things you don't even know are there. Now, was it some type of experiment that got away or something? I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, it's always been suggested to me that might have been what it was. There are other things I've heard over the years as well. But I did find out later that a woman downstream in Marriottsville had seen this thing several hours before I did and made a report. So they were tracking it. So so that was a big surprise, and I had confirmation from a Sykesville police officer several years later about this, and he was there. And
what did he say about it?
Well, he acknowledged everything that I had said. I mean, he didn't really know what they were looking for, but he was there. I had literally written about it. Well, first of all, when BFRO came into existence, I was contacted back in '95 about this, and I told them what I saw, and then they put the report up on the BFRO site. And then I had a retired police officer, contact me and said they had seen it and were there and verified it. But anyway.
And what's the BFRO?
The Bigfoot Field Research Organization. And, but as time went by, I had discovered that there had been Bigfoot sightings in that area years previous to that, and this being they called the Sykesville Monster. It was part of national news. There was an area in Sykesville along the river where this thing was breaking it into homes and garages and chicken pens and such, and it was originally reported by the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper and then started making national news. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I knew one of the gentlemen I worked with told me about this later on. And he was a family member of several of the witnesses, so I got access to these witnesses from the previous sightings, and several others actually, and started doing my own investigation. And that kind of got me hooked. I mean, I was into cryptids after that, and and I saw as I was talking, I saw something come up about the Blair Witch, and actually this sighting was not far from where they actually filmed the Blair Witch in Patapsco River State Park. So I mean, Patapsco State Park is pretty strange, all in all. But
speaking of strange, it seems like Pennsylvania itself is chock full of strange.
Yeah, this was Maryland. Pennsylvania is very strange. Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of very strange reports around here. And, my other sighting my Winged Humanoid sighting was in Pennsylvania as well.
Tell us about that.
Okay, this was in 1988. I was living outside of Baltimore, and I happened to be at a Boy Scout exposition. I don't know what it was, really, to be honest with you, but I happened to run into somebody I knew, somebody I had been friends with in high school, and as a younger kid in Pennsylvania, who was actually a scoutmaster then. He and I started talking and sat down and had something to eat. But he knew about my involvement in the paranormal from back then, because when we were kids, we used to go out onto the battlefield at nighttime at Gettysburg and camp out, and we saw a lot of different stuff together. So he knew what it was about and all. But as we started talking, and him knowing my background, he said, "Look, there's something been going on at the old Camp Conewago." And this is a Boy Scout camp just north of Gettysburg. Something been going on at Camp Conewago where the troops have been camping out into the woods at night. I mean, woods, during the weekends, and they've been getting chased out of there because they hear these screaming sounds and, scaring the kids, and they're packing up and leaving. And apparently this had been going on all summer long. So, when I talked to him, it was in the fall. It was in October of 1988. So he said, another scoutmaster and I are going out there next weekend. Do you want to tag along? I said, sure. So I did. I met them up there, and when I got there, we just hiked out into the woods and set up our camp in the regular camping area along the creek, along the trail, and set our 3 tents up, got a fire going. By that time, it was like 6 o'clock in the evening. It's just starting to turn dark, and that night was pretty uneventful. We though in the morning when we woke, the next morning, that Saturday morning, when we woke up, the other gentleman asked if we had heard footsteps, and I did. I had heard something walking through the campsite, but I thought it was probably one of those guys going in the woods and relieve themselves or whatever. But nothing seemed to be disturbed or anything, so we didn't, we think much about it. So we went ahead and put our packs on and went out, started hiking in the woods, and we were gone most of the day, just trying to get a feel of what was going, and maybe we'd see something. And we got back and just sat there and cooked some dinner, and we were just sitting there talking for most of the night. So I guess about 10 o'clock, we heard a screaming sound. Now, it wasn't that dramatic.
This let's set the scene. This is in the woods.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the woods. We heard the screaming sound. Even, though, like I said, it wasn't that dramatic. It could have been an animal or something. I didn't really think much about it. But because it wasn't, it wasn't the way people had been describing it to him as what it was. So I thought maybe it was just an animal. Anyway, we went back to talking. We're sitting there. And about an hour later, we heard another scream. Now, this time it was really close. And it was blood curdling. It sounded like a woman was screaming, to be quite honest with you. And it kind of faded in and out. So we had our hackles up then. So we decided, well, look, we're going to stay up the rest of the night and see if anything else happened. So we did. We were. So we were sitting there for maybe, I don't know, another 45 minutes or so. And I had to get up and stretch my legs. So I got up and walked over towards the trail. I was just standing there looking over onto the creek. And, that night it wasn't a full moon, but it was enough moonlight that we could see into the woods and into the creek. And, I just had this feeling that something was watching us. You just get that feeling. So I walked back to those guys and said, look, why don't we go out onto the trail and just go up and down and see if we see anything. So we did. And we got our flashlights, went back to back on the trail, and we didn't get far out there because we all noticed at the same time in the creek, there was something standing in the middle of the creek, and it had real bright red eyes. And it wasn't like a reflection. It was like literally light exuding from this thing. And by the time we got the flashlights on this beam, it jettisoned into the air with a whooshing sound. And as it reached its apex, it screamed and then took off.
Wow.
Now, we hauled ass back to the campsite.
I bet you did.
My buddy wasn't talking at all. The other guy mentioned me, did you see the structures on his back? And I did. I saw something on his back, but I never saw any wings unfurl or anything. And we were kind of going over what we had seen. Of course, everybody saw the red eyes. My buddy, though, wasn't saying anything, but he did pipe up later and say, look, I'm not staying here tonight. I'm going up in the administration building and sleep up there. And so he and the other guy went up there. I stayed at the campsite. I wanted to see what the hell this thing was. I was hoping to come back, but it was, nothing else happened that night. But that was my encounter with this winged being. And, for 20 years, I really didn't say a whole lot about it. I told a few people about it, but after I had started the blog, I wrote about it. And after I wrote about it and put it out there, then I started getting responses. I had one gentleman who lived near there at Dick's Dam tell me that, I had been hearing that screaming sound for over 20 years now. I had no idea what it was. And I don't, maybe it's what you saw. So, I thought, well, maybe he is. But then again, I got another email from a scout leader And he told me, he said, my troop and I were out at Camp Conawaga a couple weeks ago. And we were camped out in the camping area, and the boys had gone out onto the trail during the day. But they came running back, screaming and yelling that they had seen what they called a dragon. And he thought they were just pulling his leg, But, he said, well, I didn't really think much of it. I know they were scared, but I don't know what they saw. But he said, when I read what you had seen, and maybe they saw something. So since that time, that was 2008 when I posted that. Since that time, I have received 6 reports of these beings, these winged beings along Conawaga Creek. Now, Conawaga Creek extends a little west, then extends east and empties into the Susquehanna River. So the creek itself is about a 25-mile stretch. And I've had sightings along that creek in all types of different areas, but it's always along the creek. So there's something there, or was there. I mean, the last report I had was 3 years ago, or 4 years ago. So that was my introduction to winged humanoids, though I'd always known about the Mothman. But I find it strange now that these sightings that we're getting in Chicago, for the most part, are very similar to what I had seen. So I don't know if there's a connection there or not, but it's interesting.
How tall would you say this thing was?
About 6 foot.
6 feet.
Mm-hmm. Dark, emaciated looking. It was very similar to what we're seeing in Chicago.
And Vincent Richardson asks, do you think it showed itself to you, and is it connected to the Chicago Mothman phenomenon?
Very well could be. That's something I've thought about a lot of, but, who knows?
Anybody's guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have pulled up your blog, the Phantoms and Monsters blog. Why don't you kind of walk us through when you started your blog and how it evolved and all that kind of thing?
Well, I had been writing for another website for several years.
Are you able to tell us which one it was, or?
East Ghost was the name. East Ghost was the name of it, and I don't even know if they're still there. A guy who lived in Maryland, and I was living in Maryland at the time, so I was telling him I had written about some of my investigations in Maryland, and I had some people tell me, you ought to start a blog. I said, okay, well, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe I'll try that. So that was 2005, and I did. I started Phantoms and Monsters. I don't even know how I came up with the name, but I started the blog, very small blog at the time, and since that time, it's a daily thing now. I mean, I write every day for the most part, and I update with new reports and even some historical reports. I try to cover almost all aspects of the paranormal, UFOs, cryptids, hauntings, anything unexplained. And because of that, I get a lot of reports from people. And as I do so, we do have, as of the past couple of years, especially since we started working on the Chicago Mothman phenomena, we have the Phantoms and Monsters Fortean research team, where I have several individuals working with me, investigating reports. At this present time, I think we have 17 team investigators, as well as 25 plus affiliates. So what we try to do is when a report comes in, especially here in Pennsylvania, we try to get boots on the ground to look into it. And for the most part, we can usually do that. And, this is something that I've always wanted to do, been able to help direct others into looking into this phenomena, so that we can make reports, and then the reports are disseminated and put out for the public to read. So, that's what we do.
Very good. Very, very cool. One of the books that you've written is about winged cryptids.
Mm-hmm.
Was the experience that you had the touchstone that created the urge for you to research this and write about it?
I guess. I mean, I had other winged cryptid sighting reported to me previous to that. Even before I was writing the book, I was compiling reports. Of course, it was all written down or typed up. Yeah, we've, I've it's something I don't know, say that that's the nexus of actually looking into that. I'd say the Bigfoot sighting was kind of the beginning of all cryptids, all unexplained stuff other than,
Sure.
Hauntings. But, I kind of take it as it comes. And, I'm not above looking into anything, to be honest with you.
Vincent Richardson in the chat says, the rest is history. Phantoms and Monsters Fortean research team is one of the hardest working paranormal investigators in the business.
Well, I appreciate that. I will disclose Vincent is my producer.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks.
And
for
part of the
being here,
team
Vincent.
as well, so he knows.
Yeah. All in the family.
Yeah.
You have several books and PDFs under the Phantoms and Monsters moniker.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again here. What can you tell us about Unexplained Encounters?
Well, I had written 5 books, which I called the Encounters series. Excuse me. And now these books are no longer in print, but what it was these were accumulations of cases I had from the very beginning. So there are 5 smaller books that I had published and put out there. And as of now, like I said, we it's not available on Amazon. I mean, unless somebody puts it up there and sells a used one. But what we're trying to do is to take all 5 of those books, re-edit, compile, and put into a larger volume at some point.
I see.
So we'll see. I mean, we'll see how much work it is, but we'll see if that happens.
So, along with Unexplained Encounters,
Mm-hmm.
we also have Strange Encounters, Mysterious Encounters. That one's rather large there. And etc.
It was Cryptid Encounters, and I forget what I'll be honest, forget what the other one was. But I called it the Encounters series.
Yeah. Strange Encounters, Unexplained Encounters. When people come to you with cases like the ones we've been discussing,
Mm-hmm.
the winged humanoids, the humanoids that jettison the wings or just fly off.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think these things are, man?
I think most cryptids, if not all cryptids, other than maybe indigenous beings like Bigfoot in certain areas, like up the Pacific Northwest, Florida, around the Gulf Coast, I think they're ultra-terrestrials. Now, when I say ultra-terrestrials, I say that these are beings from another dimension. And this dimension, I believe, is very close and linear to our Earth plane. And that they have the ability to move in and out very quickly, very unceremoniously. I think some of them have the ability to cloak themselves. When there is a Bigfoot sighting, in particular, it's very fleeting. Many times it'll take off and never be seen again. But it's like that for any cryptid phenomena. upright canines, Dogman, Winged Humanoids, anything.
Yeah,
Very fleeting sightings.
What is with the upright canines? Is that the one where the two dogs in trench coats were smoking cigarettes?
No. The upright canines are basically bipedal canine cryptids. A lot of the descriptions are very similar to what people have seen in the underworld movies, like the Lycans, these huge 9-10 foot tall beings, very muscular and such.
Those are some of my favorite movies, and that would be really scary if those were real.
Well, I tell you, these people are freaked out by a lot of these sightings. We have had hunters, people who are armed, come across these things and just literally back away. And these beings, for the most part, stand their ground. But I have no really known instance of them attacking anybody. They may have chased some people very briefly, but I think they're just trying to stand their ground. But yeah, this is what people have described to us, and and I'm talking throughout, for the most part, North America. Occasionally we'll get a sighting in Europe and in other parts, but most, the whole cryptid thing, it's interesting. You hear about cryptids in the UK, and then you hear a few of them in Europe, maybe a few out in Asia, but boy, the United States and Canada, for the most part, are really, why that is, I don't know. I guess people are just more aware of it, less afraid to report it. But I'd say 90% of the sightings come out of North America.
But this is a worldwide phenomenon, yes?
Sure, it's worldwide. Yeah. Yeah, it is.
What are some of the international cases that stick out to you as a researcher?
The Owlman Amalwan, which was in Cornwall, is an interesting one. There are a few winged being sightings in the UK that I believe are interesting. There have been some werewolf sightings or lycanthropy sightings in France and in Germany, which are, for the most part, historical sightings. But there have been a few more modern ones, like the Moorbach werewolf sightings. And of course, people talk about the Yern in China, the Amasti in Russia, and during the war in Afghanistan, for the most part, maybe sometimes in Iraq, most of the sightings in Iraq were UFO sightings, but in Afghanistan, there were a few bizarre sightings that were reported by soldiers of giants and other unknown beings. There were some upright canine sightings in the mountains of Afghanistan. So,
wow,
yeah, it's an interesting mix of stuff that you hear. I'm more interested though in these sightings that I can possibly get people to go investigate, for the most part, and that's why I'm fascinated with the more local sightings. But if we get something anywhere within North America, we're going to try to get it investigated.
Lon, are you a member of the BFRO?
No.
Can you tell us a little bit about what they do?
Well, basically, they take reports and have field investigators that go out and investigate these reports. I'll be honest with you. For the most part, these reporting agencies leave a lot left to be desired. BFRO, MUFON, I think they have agendas, like a lot of other organizations. MUFON, for example, do not investigate the more non-UFO sightings, as opposed to abductions and such. They kind of back away from a lot of that. BFRO anything kind of out of the ordinary, they kind of stay away from. They're a flesh and blood group. Very few of them that are within the organization or people who are part of the powers that be at BFRO stay away from the supernatural aspect to Bigfoot.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah.
One of the guests that two of the guests that we've had have been Joshua Mccutchen and Timothy Renner, who wrote
friends of mine.
Great 2-volume series Where the Footprints End about paranormal Bigfoot. What are your feelings about paranormal Bigfoot?
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what they assess. I mean, Timothy is he's part of my team. We live very close to each other, so he does a lot of investigating here in this part of Pennsylvania. And he's a fantastic researcher. He knows his stuff, and he's like me. I'm open-minded about it. I mean, we have not found bodies. We have not found real tangible evidence as to the Bigfoot phenomena, though we have a lot of anecdotal reports. And it makes one think that, there's something different going on here as opposed to these things living as part of indigenous beings. I mean, there's something going on. There's something unexplained.
Yeah, a previously undiscovered race of hairy hominids with a breeding population big enough to continue from, time immemorial. I mean, the Native Americans have stories about not only Sasquatch, but Wendigo and skinwalkers. I was going to ask, can you tell us a little bit about those type of creatures?
Well, the skinwalker is basically, it's from a few tribes in the Southwest, the Navajo, the Hopi. They have, the skinwalker is basically a witch that has transformed itself into another being, a kind of a shape-shifting being. It's nothing good about it. It's more like a curse, but it's something that is used to intimidate people for the most part. The Windigo, honestly, is not a supernatural creature. It is of a human beginning, but it's human that has had some type of possible possession or some type of mental problem to where they turn into cannibals. They're cannibalistic. Chad Lewis wrote a great book about Wendigos. I suggest anybody that is interested in the subject get his book. So yeah, there's a big difference there. There's definite supernatural and occult definitions as far as those two beings go.
I'm curious. Earlier, you mentioned flesh gates and crawlers. What are those?
Well, they're the memes. The Slenderman, flesh gates, rakes. Those are the meme names for these beings, and these
are the thought forms, right?
Well, they're not. They're what people see on the internet and possibly unconsciously translate into a thought form or tulpa. I like to call them crawlers or walking beings or such. They're walkers or crawlers, but they still look very similar. But the name Fleshgate and Rake actually came off the internet as well as Slenderman.
Well, I knew about Slenderman, but Fleshgate is a brand new concept to me.
Yeah, well, see, that like I said, that's the meme names.
Vincent says, when the Spanish and other tribes attacked and destroyed their holy openings to their underworld, they called upon the last gods for a curse to get revenge on them. That's kind of interesting. Any thoughts on that?
Nope.
And Vincent is prodding me pale humanoids.
Yeah.
And Cam's Crash Courses says, skinwalkers are considered to be bad medicine and are very taboo in the Southwest Indian culture. I would say especially the Ute tribe.
Well, this no, that's wrong. Where Skinwalker Ranch is located is part of Ute land, but that used to belong to the Navajo, and the Ute ran them out. And when they ran them out, and this is supposed legend, a Navajo witch put a curse on the land where the area of the Skinwalker Ranch is. And that's how the name of Skinwalker Ranch came up, because of a curse by a Navajo witch.
And it didn't have to do with being usurped from their land?
Yeah, but it was they were moved off their land. They were pushed off their land by the Utes, and then the Navajo they cursed the land. That's the legend.
Mm-hmm. Well, they seem to have done a pretty good job. And I just wanted to mention that you are very generously going to give away a copy of Meme Humanoids. And so that's going to happen at the end of the show. And I understand that's going to be autographed. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. That's very generous of you. I'd like to move on to this book, Alien Disclosure, Experiencers Expose Reality. What can you tell us about this?
Well, this was a book had been wanting to write for a long time. I had been involved with the experiencer abductions, encounters, phenomena for many years. I have worked with several abductees and people who have had encounters, and since I'd say since the late 80s or so. But anyway, all the accounts in there are investigations I had done or been a part of, and I've written about a few individuals who I had dealings with, who are some well known in the ufology. So I decided at some point I'd eventually write the book.
Well, without spoiling it too much, what did they disclose?
Well, there was one individual who I'm still working with now by the name of David Eckhart. I've known David now for over a decade. He and his family have been experiencing abductions for many years. These were not UFO abductions. These were abductions at the home through portals. And he witnessed a lot of different things, and it disclosed to me a lot of what had occurred to him and his family. He was almost like as time went on, he was almost like a celebrity to these beings. They would
in what way?
They would abduct him and take him on tours of the areas, and they would try to explain things to him.
That almost sounds like the contactees.
Well, he was a contactee, but he was given more access to a lot of different things.
Did he go through the regular abduction syndrome, the medical experiments and that kind of thing?
Well, he had seen some things. David had a medical condition that was corrected by these beings eventually. But as time went,
if they fix my back, they could abduct me.
Well, anyway, they did take him to certain locations, an underground cavern-like situation, which he and I believe were on this planet. This was a reptilian type being. who was assigned to him actually, and what David observed was a vast canyon, a vast cavern of inhabitants of reptilian race, and that there were other alien beings, including humans, that were used as slave labor to either mine or do other menial labor. And he had also seen experimentation of humans and actually bodies being disposed of.
Wow.
So I mean, but I go into more detail in the book.
R.I.P. John Lear, but sounds like John Lear was right. I notice you don't have anything to say about that.
No, I didn't say it.
But he did talk about aspects of contact where the military was working alongside the aliens, the ETs, and it didn't go well for the human beings.
Well, I have written about a lot of that, and this conjecture about governments and alien beings working together side by side, and that these governments have permitted certain amount of abductions of human beings for experimentation and such. I don't necessarily buy into all that.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really seen the proof of it. I've talked to a lot of people that have believed and talked about this, and I'll be honest with you, I can't really put a finger on some of it. There may be something to it. I'd rather get my information to the people I talk to who are actually experiencing some of these things and disclose what they tell me.
And that's what the book is about.
Mm-hmm.
And Vincent is prodding me again. Says that you've recently taken over Ufo Corp from late legend Butch Witowski. We miss Butch. What is Ufo Corp?
U4 Cop. U4 Cop is the UFO Research Center of Pennsylvania. It's basically a group that Butch Witkowski had founded several years ago, and Butch passed away back in January. So myself and several other members of my Fortean team have taken it over, and we're trying to keep it going. I mean, haven't ever really been much of a UFO guy,
mm-hmm.
but I guess I'm going to be now. So. More so than before, let's put it that way.
I notice from people like Stan Gordon, mm-hmm. and Joshua Mccutchen and Timothy Renner, people that are legends in this field, that they press on in an environment where the UFO, ufology says, hey, keep your Bigfoot out of my UFOs. And a lot of the flesh and blood researchers will say, keep your UFOs out of my Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Timothy Renner said on this show that if you give me a UFO sighting in Pennsylvania within 1 week and 100 miles, I guarantee you there will be a Bigfoot sighting.
Probably.
Why is that the case, and why is Pennsylvania so thick with these kind of beings and creatures?
Yeah, I wish I knew that, but it is. I mean, it does have some really hot areas. I've worked with all these guys. I mean, with Timothy and Stan. I've known Stan for forever, and Eric Altman, Sean Forker. A lot of these people work with me, and we work together. We've been working together for years. Why we really have no explanation for a lot of this, but we do know the activity is there and real. And the only thing that we can do is just keep cracking at it when we get the information to go to the locations and check it out and do the best we can is to be able to disseminate what is really going on. Many times we do. Of course, there's been some disappointments, which it's just part of the thing. Yeah, I mean, Pennsylvania is a very high activity area, but there are a lot of states as well that are very high active. So, it's interesting. Just like the old Rust Belt, the political Rust Belt of like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin. That's kind of there's a lot of activity in those states. Texas is always heavy. Florida is always heavy. The Pacific Northwest. You got certain areas that are very conducive to a lot of weird stuff, and
it almost seems like different regions of North America have different hairy hominids. You've got the skunk ape, and you mentioned Boggy Creek earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got, sort of a catch-all of Sasquatch, and I think there's a Bubba down south somewhere. Help me remember the rest of these.
Well, you got the Momo in Missouri. You've got others, the Lake Worth sightings down in Texas. There are a lot of different sightings of so-called Sasquatch and Bigfoot type beings, and there are some different aspects to them. Like I said before, I think areas like the Pacific Northwest, Florida, and around the Gulf Coast, they may very well be indigenous areas. They may be indigenous areas where there are actual beings that are actually living, breeding, and such. But I think they're, for the most part, and also parts of Canada as well. But I think for the most part, these Bigfoot that people see are just ultra-terrestrials that show up, and we really don't find a whole lot of habituation situations with these beings.
Yeah,
it's more like a one-off, and that's it. And sure, you're gonna have situations where people say that they live in the woods here and they're very near and that. Well, yeah, that's well and fine, but you never know. I mean, you talked about the Native Americans. They never really thought of these creatures as actual flesh and blood creatures. They always thought of them as supernatural for the most part. It was part of their lore, so I don't know. I mean, I think it's I think it's more of a supernatural being as opposed to being a flesh and blood being.
Yeah, it seems like there are reports of beings that resemble Sasquatch, but some have different claws or paws. Dogmen, werewolves. It's I mentioned earlier the I don't know if you think that it's mythological or just made up, part of the meme creatures, the dogmen that are smoking cigarettes in trench coats.
Yeah, well, I've never heard of that.
You've never heard of that?
Nah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's a pretty popular one. James West asks, what is one of the strangest Pennsylvania dogman reports you've ever had?
Well, you're going to get James on here because James has had 2 encounters out in Greene County, Pennsylvania.
Do tell.
Well, I mean, I think it'd be better if he told, because it happened to him. So maybe you can book James on here. He'll come on.
Okay. Well, James, be in touch. What do you think that people that are involved in these alien disclosure situations where experiencers talk about what's happened to them and what they've been told, what do you expect a reader to come away from alien disclosure with?
Well, I mean, the only thing I can do with anything that I write about or detail is give as much that information that I know, uh, and not embellish on it, put it out there, and have them disseminate and make their own opinion. I do that with the blog. I don't necessarily write something and tell people, well, this is this and this is actually what happened. I will put a blurb at the end many times, but for the most part, I think it's best that the reader opens their mind up and expresses their thoughts. I mean, I have a Reddit, a subreddit over where I put a link at the end of the post where people can go there and give their opinions as to what this was or what I wrote about. I mean, you know, I'm always open to that. So yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not the person that should be, you know, I can present it, but I shouldn't be telling people what's really going on unless, you know, it's something maybe I had encounter with.
Yeah, people
you know,
need to draw their own conclusions.
Sure. I mean, I think that's that's one thing that a lot of investigators and people who rate get in trouble with. I don't think people like to be told what is going on and that they shouldn't have an opinion as to what it is. That's why we have so many fights and I hate to say fights, but has so many disagreements within the paranormal community, the cryptid community. I think people need to be more open-minded about some of this phenomenon. You know, of course, like with the Bigfoot, you got the flesh and blood people, then you get the people who believe it's supernatural. You know, I'm on the fence in a way, but I'm more on the supernatural end of it because it just is stuff I have, you know, people have disclosed to me and some of the evidence that I have seen, some of the evidence that has been told to me. But, you know, I'm not going to argue with somebody. I got people working on the team who are strictly flesh and blood. Mm-hmm. You know, and I you know, I respect that. You know, they're entitled to their opinion. You know, it's interesting when I wrote the book, Mothman Dynasty, I put a chapter at the end of the book where I allowed everybody on the team to write about what they believe this was and their thoughts on it. And I had 11 people, I think, and I think everybody had their own opinion. I mean, Rosemary Ellen Golly was part of our team. Really? And I asked her to write it, and she wrote her opinion as well. So yeah, this was you know, I'm not going to go out and just try to limit what people had to say about it. Now, of course, if somebody has their opinion that's just absolutely ridiculous, I'm just not going to, you know, I'm not even going to entertain that, and that does happen. I've had people on the team who had ulterior motives for a lot of different reasons. Figured that they were above the team, above what we were doing, and they were gone because I don't have time to fool with that. And yeah, so that's why I'm very serious about this. This is what I do, and you know, people can't get along with the program or go along with the program, but then they're going to have to find some other way of doing it because. You know, and I think the folks who are with me now realize that, you know, I could be a pain in the ass sometimes, but then that's just the way things are.
James says, I think they're like a 3-pronged spear, interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial, flesh and blood, part of the time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think these interdimensional beings are flesh and blood, but I think they have abilities to move in and out.
Yeah, it seems like there's some sort of a dimensional aspect or a portal aspect. And speaking of portals, I was going to ask you to weigh in on the Dave Pilates missing 4111
mm-hmm.
Can-Am missing project.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you know, Dave's done a lot of work on all that. I mean, I don't necessarily believe or buy into everything that he may say, but though Dave I got to give Dave credit for one thing. He does not put a lot of opinion out there. He presents it, and
He's just the facts, man.
yeah, and he lets people disseminate. Now he does have an issue with people coming up with theories that he doesn't necessarily agree with, and I can, that's his thing. He can do that. But I think he's presented a lot of head scratching reports over the years. Personally, what I think is going on, and I don't know if he would agree with this, I think most of it has to do with portals. I don't think it, I thought maybe at one point it might have been cryptids snatching people, but I don't really believe that's the case now. I think it's more people getting into or walking into these openings, these doorways to other realities or other dimensions, and then getting lost. We have tens of thousands of people go missing every year. Mm-hmm. That are never heard from again. And, who's to say that there's something unexplained or otherworldly about that?
I think the question isn't, have we been visited by extraterrestrial beings, but what is their agenda? Human experiencers are providing us with actual accounts of alien abduction and close encounters with otherworldly beings. And these stories are important. They give us a real sense of this global phenomenon. And hopefully we'll get some information in these disclosures to the possible agenda behind these visitations.
Well, that's what we hope for. There are theories out there. I have my own theories. I believe that we are that. And let me start like this. I believe the human race is a universal race or species. Mm-hmm. I think many times when people see extraterrestrials or what they believe are aliens, they have a humanoid-like form. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's just a coincidence. I think humans have evolved over eons into other beings. I think a lot of the creatures or a lot of the beings that we see are evolved humans. I think a lot of these beings have the ability now in the future to come back into our time for whatever reason.
Interesting.
And I think a lot of times when there's an abduction scenario, I don't necessarily believe it's just to experiment for tissue, this and that. I think there's a more ethereal, more I don't know. I'd say there's a more spiritual aspect to it. When David was involved with his abductions, one of the one things that stood out to me is that he had learned from this reptilian that this reptilian and other extraterrestrial beings believe in a higher power. Mm-hmm. Almost to the point like they're very devoted to it. They do what it tells them to do. Is it another being, or is it just a spiritual thing or whatever? Like we believe in God or a higher power. I believe as time has gone on, as humans have evolved and have evolved into these other beings, I believe they have lost some things. I think they're jealous because humans believe in an afterlife. They believe that when their physical body passes and dies, that there is a life force or what we call a soul that lives on, that it ascends. And I think they are looking for that because I don't think they have that. I don't think they even have that concept in anything that they're involved with, any of their spiritual thoughts or anything. I think they are very jealous of humans or however you want to call it.
We have a soul.
That we have a soul, that we believe that we live on.
I've
And
heard
I think
the
that's the
phrase.
reason behind it.
I've heard the phrase containers as potential aliens referring to human beings, that we are containers for the soul.
Well, that might, maybe it has something to do with it. I don't know. Uh, but I think, after listening to folks for years and years, the abduction scenario has changed over time. It would start out like, people would be abducted by a spacecraft, then they would be abducted for some type of hybridization for some reason, and why that was going on. Now most abductions are done within the home through either a portal or some other means of transportation, more ethereal, as far as the body staying in one place and the human soul or human life force being moved to another location, like a bilocation situation. I think that is really, I think that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, you're not the first person I've heard espouse that opinion. And Vincent says, I think we scare them too for some reason. Yeah, it's difficult to understand, but as was mentioned earlier, I do think this is all related somehow. Not just Bigfoot and UFOs, but all of the paranormal. It does seem to be interdimensional. We've got, hauntings. I was talking to my neighbor yesterday. He said that his wife saw a full apparition ghost. And you talk to people, you're especially like you being a researcher and writer, you find all kinds of strange stories, but they all do seem to be related. And regardless of how many different kinds or races of aliens or ETs there may be, they do seem to be after us for something specific.
Well, I think that's the agenda for the most part. The paranormal and all aspects of the paranormal, there's a fine line between all of them. And I think a lot of them are connected for a lot of different reasons. And, when it all comes down to it, it may all be the same thing. Who knows? But, I think that this is, I think as people go deeper and deeper into the research of the unexplained, I think they're going to need to be more open-minded and to be able to think beyond just looking at something, and give everything a chance and see what becomes of it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the philosophy that we need to have. When people see a landed craft, they've been known to power fail, not just cars, but entire cities, like New York in the 70s. Allegedly, that I think it was a 3-day long blackout was caused by flying saucers.
Well, that's what they say.
Yeah, and you get the Dave Pilates missing 411 Canon missing project. People disappearing in state parks, which again sort of has echoes of the interdimensional aspect. Somebody will mention, looking over their shoulder and seeing the last person in line. 3 seconds later, looking over their shoulder again, and they're gone. There's no trace. These things and the different creatures and things that you have written about, I think go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think for the most part, there's a lot of connection between a lot of these different things. It's interesting that when I get a case, for the most part, if I get a case and I'm starting to look into the case, getting deeper and deeper into it, most times something else pops up, another aspect of the paranormal, and it happens a lot. I think a lot of so-called extraterrestrial cases can overlap into actual hauntings. I think Bigfoot cases can overlap into UFO or even haunting cases. It's been known to happen.
Well, I remember when I was talking with Joshua Mccutchen, he mentioned that if you take all of the Bigfoot, throwing of rocks, pounding on the the front door, the strange voices and mimicry that they do, you just take that out of the woods and put it into the house. Now it's a poltergeist. They're so similar that it's just the location maybe that's different.
Possible.
And I wanted to ask you about the winged cryptids, because you've had an experience with that. What do you think these things are? Where do they come from? Why are they here? I realize these are, broad questions, but what the fuck? What the actual fuck?
Since we have been involved with this case in Chicago, and especially the past year or so, we have gone a little bit deeper into the actual nexus of these beings. With the information that we have received, and through some of the people who work with me who are psychics and intuitives, I believe, and from what we've been told, that these are ultra-terrestrial beings from another linear dimension, and that they and other cryptids reside on the same plane as they do. And I think that, and this is all cursory. This is we're taking baby steps with this whole theory. It's something that we will write about later and present to the public. But I believe that these beings have been around us for eons. I mean,
time immemorial.
I think I think they were with us as maybe the original deities that humans relied on. This is something that has been told to me as well, that humans were, associated those beings that they believed in, those deities they believed in, as like a chimera or something that looked human but had other aspects to it that wasn't human. I think that they really have always been involved with us from the beginning. They have been suppressed, threatened, killed by other powers.
Hunters, trappers. Yeah.
Well, I think more religious, like the monotheists and such. I think in our history, I think a lot of these beings have been persecuted by man, and they've kind of gone back into their own realm, but are making a push forward now for whatever reason, and that is something we just don't know why. Are they trying to tell us something? I think they are, but I think it may be some time before we actually find out what it is. We're very vigilant about all this. I mean, if we, all we can do is collect the information and gather their trust, and then eventually put it out there at their discretion and our discretion, and we'll decide. We'll just present it to the public and let them ascertain as to what they believe it is. We've already come forward with a few things in the past, and sure, we're going to get pushback on things. I really don't worry about pushback anymore. I'm at an age now where stuff like that rolls off my back for the most part.
Sure.
But if I believe it's something important to disclose, and that it's not going to hurt anybody or hurt anything, and I'll do that. That's part of my philosophy.
In all the years that you've been involved in cryptozoology and ufology, what do you think would be the person that has influenced you the most as far as your process, your writing, your research? Who would be not necessarily a mentor, although that would be good to talk about, but somebody that you either worked with or you admired their work?
Oh man, it's just too many to count. I take a piece of everybody, to be honest with you. I've met a lot of people.
Spoken about John Keel.
Yeah, Stan Gordon, John Keel, even people that are still working, Ray Keller, Dr. Ray Keller, people on my team even. I respect everybody on my team. Rosemary Ellen Guiley and I were very close. I thought she was fantastic. She taught me a lot. But people who I've been a part of with, Eric Altman, Sean Forker, Tim Renner, all these people, even Butch Witkowski, and all these people I have been associated with. I've learned a little bit from each one of them. And, when I write a book, I give them all credit because they've always contributed to what I do and to my thinking and to my philosophy as an investigator, researcher, and as a writer. And, Yep. That's, I can't really name one.
Yeah. I think that's like asking to name your favorite child.
Right.
But certainly, there are people that have influenced us. I'm sure you, like me, read, warehouses full of paranormal books about everything from psychic powers to the Loch Ness Monster, the Great Pyramid, all that kind of stuff. And of course, Ancient Aliens seems to be very popular, if only for, Giorgio's crazy hair. What research have you done personally in the field?
Well, I used to do a lot of work on the field as far as actual sightings and stuff. Most of my field work is involved in hauntings and clearings and those type of situations. I have been on several Bigfoot investigations locally. I'm not one that really gets on the plane or gets in the car and takes off and does something. Especially, I'm disabled now, so I do much less than what I used to do. Mm-hmm. But no, I'm kind of the director now, and I feel fortunate because I have people who trust me enough to work with me. I give them every credit in the world. I always will, and they're kind of my eyes and ears now, and I rely a lot on them more so than I used to rely on myself years and years ago.
I'm going to ask you to wax nostalgic. Some of the old legends and sightings are some of the most enigmatic and strange as far as high strangeness goes. Things like the Jersey Devil, a creature that left tracks in the snow, like goat feet for miles, including over houses and roofs and things like that. I guess some of these mythological or legendary creatures come from Native American legends, but it's a fact that when the European white man came to the United States, the colonies, there was a lot going on there. And I'm not just talking about like the Salem witch trials and Arrogate and all that kind of thing, but people reported, when newspapers first started, people reported seeing all kinds of strange things. Giants, earlier, stick Indians were mentioned. What are stick Indians?
I tell you, back when the colonies were being first inhabited in the 1600s into the early 1700s. And my family actually came here in 1734. So I kind of got a little basis on what's going on. I don't think it had necessarily a lot to do with the actual indigenous people's folklore, but I think a lot of it had to do with the folklore from the old world kind of melding into what is going on here.
Sure.
And of course, when they started printing newspapers and such back then, every little story got blown up.
Sure.
A tabloid was
all about the railroad, right?
Yeah, a tabloid was kind of like the early part. That was the beginning of actual news media or actual print media back then. And if you go back and look at some of these early accounts, the early newspaper accounts, it's almost comical to some degree. Some of the descriptions and some of the connotations that people come up with these things. I'll be honest with you. We did a lot of research into the early upright canine Dogman sightings here in Pennsylvania back in the early 1800s, when a lot of these sightings were coming from German farmers, the Pennsylvania Dutch and such, who moved into this area. And a lot of those farmers moved out of Pennsylvania into Maryland, and there was at one point a whole rash of sightings of wolfman or werewolf sightings. And if you looked at some of those reports coming out of Frederick County, for instance, they were very similar to accounts coming back from old Germany back in the 1600s, or back in France back in during the lycanthropy sightings, and I think I think the actual discretion wasn't part of a lot of the reports that were coming out back then. The more sensational, the better. But if you do look into them and you kind of take out the parts that are more important for a research value and look at the reports that you're getting now, there is a connection there. So were people seeing the same thing as people are seeing now? Yeah, I do believe that. I don't necessarily believe it has anything to do with the actual lore of the indigenous folks that were here. Maybe some of it did, maybe some of that got incorporated in some of the sightings, but I think for the most part it comes from what people experienced or believed when they were living back in the old world.
What do you think is the most important takeaway from your research and the things that you've been told by experiencers and other researchers?
I mean, my whole thing is that I want to put out there what people tell me and let people judge for themselves. I don't want to be known for someone who puts a story out there to push it and embellish on it for fame and this. I'm not into that. That's not me. Look, if I make a little money off of it, fine, but it's not. It has nothing to do with pushing a story or pushing a sighting and such. I just put it out there for consumption, and people can take it any way they want. But that's been the way I've thought about this from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one of those people that ends up at conventions and this and that. That's just not me. I mean, I'll read a book here and there. I don't necessarily, I'll go on a radio show like this or a radio show somewhere or coast to coast and talk about what I do. But yeah, that's fine. But it's, I'm more worried. I'm more interested in hearing what people have to say, what they experience, when they contact me after having an encounter or an experience. I'm part of that experience then it's up to me to look into it, and I give them the benefit of the doubt when they tell me what they saw until I figure out something different, which sometimes does happen. If it's something that's been manufactured, I'm not gonna continue on with it. But if it's something that's got some validity to it, I will look into it, and I will continue to research it. And that's been what I do. I mean,
Rosemary did research that was really strange and really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to briefly just share this from the back of the book that we're giving away here in a moment, the Meme Humanoids. In 2012, an incredible phenomenon began to occur. Internet users in earnest began reporting frightening encounters with emaciated, pale, hairless humanoids that for the most part crawled on all fours. Internet users attempted to equate these entities with characters of Native American mythology, oblivious to the fact that the humanoids in these encounters bore a resemblance to the fictional Rake. Many witnesses suggested that they were skinwalkers, medicine men or witches of traditional Navajo lore who possessed the ability to transform into animals. Others proposed that these emaciated humanoids were manifestations of the Windigo, a malevolent cannibalistic spirit of Cree and Algonquin legend. Others still began to invent new names for these creatures, such as flesh gates, crawlers, and the latter evoking the 2005 movie entities that likely helped to inspire the Rake originally. What is the Rake?
Well, it's like I said, it's the meme. I mean, it's the it's one of those pale humanoids that people saw on the internet, and I don't know who gave them that name, but that's the name that kind of stuck with it.
Interesting. And Vincent mentions that First Nations people in Canada is where Wendigo lore comes from. I would like to, at this point, welcome Canadian Spider-Man. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Lon. Thank you for being here very much. That's great, and glad to have you with us.
I'm glad to be here.
Canadian Spider-Man.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this.
Is one of my mods, and he's fantastic. It's crazy, these mods, they're so fast. I don't even know how to react to that. Uh-oh. We've got an Arcane Haunted House Company t-shirt there. You should be getting some new t-shirts, by the way. Canadian Spider-Man. Do we have the wheel ready for the giveaway?
I am not sure. Let's check on that. I don't have it. No.
Looks like
but
Antiderivative Jill.
Oh, yes. It's being updated.
Has just one more minute.
Yep.
So we'll talk about Slender Man a little bit. What can you tell us about Slender Man, Lon?
Well, like I said, it was a meme. It was it came out of a fictional internet series that was presented, I think, on YouTube from the very beginning. That involved this faceless, tall being that was very slender, that was dressed in a black suit and tie, and according to the meme itself, it was it just showed up everywhere, hung around kids, took kids, and this and that, and I think the original episode just sprung into just something unbelievable, and it ended up on 4chan and a couple other these internet forums, and it took a life of its own, and in fact, it culminated to this situation up in Wisconsin. I think it was Waukesha, where these two girls ended up trying to kill a friend of theirs because they believed that if they did, they'd be able to live in the mansion with the Slender Man in the forest around them. So
I believe they stabbed her 7 times.
Yeah, they almost killed her.
And they were ready to send her up the river.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the judge offered some leniency.
Well, I think they're out now. I think both of them are out.
Yeah.
Okay. You have the wheel, Cardinalson. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, not a problem. And I also wanted to, before we spin the wheel, first of all, great show. Thanks for coming on, Lon. I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
These are subjects and topics that I think we could talk for hours about. And I also wanted to
don't worry
plug
about it. I got off the camera.
your blog.
Thank you.
And ask you where people can find more stuff about you online.
Well, they can go to phantomsandmonsters.com. They can also go to cryptidhunters.org, which is the team website. I have a radio show every Friday night at 9 o'clock live at Phantoms and Monsters Radio on YouTube. Just search Phantoms and Monsters Radio and it'll come up. Next week, tomorrow night, we have Ken Gerhardt coming on, and he's going to do a live chat, open chat, answering folks' questions. So if you want to talk to, if you come in the chat and you have a question for Ken, he's going to answer them for you. He very rarely does anything like this. So this is kind of a unique opportunity for folks. My books can all be found on Amazon. Just put Lon Strickler in the search, and the books will come up.
And I noticed on Amazon that some of your books are only available as PDFs. And for people that didn't get here at the beginning, you mentioned that all of these volumes are going to be compiled into a single volume.
That's what we're thinking at this point. I don't know. It depends on the publisher.
But that's something that the publisher wants to do.
Well, they've been talking about it. It's not set in stone.
And is your blog phantomsandmonsters.com or org?
Yeah, phantomsandmonsters.com.
Okay. Very good. And there's a link for Crypto Hunters.
.org.
.org. Okay. And of course,
it's cryptidhunters.org.
Right. And your books are available through the publishing company Beyond the Fray Publishing. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and bring our wheel in. And it's time to spin the wheel.
Yep. Okay. Here we go. I will share my screen now. Okay, here we go.
And this is for a copy of Meme Humanoids. If I can find it here. I don't think I have it up anymore. But this is your latest book, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, whenever Canadian Spider-Man is ready, we'll go ahead and bring the wheel forward. And there we go.
Yep. Okay.
Uh-oh.
No, I had it, and then you had me thinking it. You had me second guessing myself, so I
No, it was me.
Okay.
All right.
That's all right. Here we go.
So, how many people do we have on the list?
Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
12. All right.
Solid dozen.
Let's give her a spin. I always get seasick when I see my head go around like that, but
yeah, I was gonna ask you about that.
it makes me woozy for some reason.
Okay,
Let
place your bets
her rip.
now. All right, here we go.
No sound.
Oh, nope, the sound button is on right there.
Tolfer! Congratulations. Wins
Tolfer.
the autographed copy.
Congratulations.
That book. That is fantastic. Yeah, it makes me dizzy too. All right. Then we will have our mods get in touch and get the information to me so I can get it to Tolfer. And it's a wonderful book, and I'm jealous. I don't get to win free books. I only get to facilitate the giving of free books. So, yes, congratulations, Tolfer. And we're over 2 hours. So, Lon, I really want to thank you for being on Into the Fringe. And
Yes. Thank you.
is there anything that you wanted to plug or say before we wrapped up?
No, I think I pretty well said everything I need to say.
Canadian Spider-Man?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to say, I know you're probably busy like everybody else, and that was really interesting and a privilege to have you with us. So thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. Hopefully we can do it again.
Second that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Cardinal Sin. I'll leave you gentlemen alone.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, that'll do it then. And Lon, I hope you'll come back to Into the Fringe.
Okay. Sounds good.
Because I'd like to do some deep dives into each book, do some casework, and look at some of that stuff. Vincent mentions that tomorrow is Phantoms and Monsters Radio. Can you tell us how we can listen to that?
Yeah, you just go to Phantoms and Monsters Radio at YouTube. All you got to do is put it in the search. It'll come up, and like I said, we have Ken Gerhardt coming on to do an open chat with the folks in the chat room. So we're expecting a big crowd. If you have questions for Ken, who is a well-known and renowned cryptozoologist and author, meet us there tomorrow night, and it'll be an extended show.
Awesome. That sounds great. Well, I do want to thank all the mods and everybody that was in the chat. And I think this was a great show. And that'll do it for tonight. So for Lon Strickler and Canadian Spider-Man, it's Cardinal Sin. Out.